When we bring up the term experimental artist, it kind of it opens up a real can of worms, especially nowadays, because what is experimental is entirely debatable. And in fact, you could say that in the 1950s and 1960s definition of the word doesn't really exist anymore. And what's been done is so huge and so diverse that it's really difficult to be an experimental artist these days. So I think my take on this whole idea of experimentation is more about, it's an issue to do with fear and an issue to do with making choices. And it's an issue that we face a lot as artists and as creative people. And our work is constantly being compared to, and we say in conversation with work that has come before and work of our contemporaries. And it's very easy to compare and place levels of experimentalness, on work. And in fact, I think what the best in truly experimental artists do is that they free themselves up to do things just because they feel that it's right, and to follow those sort of instinctual urges. Despite what's actually printed on the wall there, which can sort of lead you to think that this is a very gender issues centered and maybe even feminist work, it turns out that was not entirely, or maybe even at all, the idea behind this work. And that's when I got really excited and realized that what I came around the corner and connected with instantly in this work was probably the topic of experimentation that I want to talk about tonight, in particularly in a visual artist work, but it can be related to sound work, to any kind of performance, to business, to contemporary culture, and I think it's a really interesting topic. What we notice in this work, I think it's really interesting, is that they're very strong. This is a very strong statement, and that's, I think, what automatically leads us to the conclusion of some of these very strong social issues. But the fact that Ms. Sims said that this was not, in fact, a piece necessarily about feminism or about gender issues entirely, at least, that we realized that what she's created here was something that is more or less created because she likes it and because she wanted it. Let's say, as an instinct, I dropped that piece of red fabric. Well, the very real and very significant temptation there as an artist is to ask yourself, why? What's the reason for me doing that? What does this say about my work? How does this compare to and relate to work of my colleagues and similar work that's been done? And I think that part of experimentation and part of that bravery in the creative process is being able to go with the gut instinct and do something without any real justification for that artistic choice necessarily. Now, of course, there are a lot of things that come out naturally and subconsciously for an artist that's trained or working for many years, and a lot of your technique and a lot of your prior experiences and choices come out subconsciously. But I think an artist will inevitably always come across this choice to do something that doesn't really have a good reason or an explanation. And I come across this all the time in my own work. And for example, I'll say, man, I really need this color, and I'm not sure why. It doesn't make any sense in this piece. It doesn't. There's no reason for it to be on stage. There's no reason. It doesn't tie in any way to the. Let's say it's a play, the storyline, the narrative arc. It's just, I feel read at this moment. Now, the interpretation of the work, I think, should be totally open-ended. It can it can lead us to discussing other social issues and contemporary issues. But I think as an artist that it's something to avoid. It's, for me anyway, often I think it's best to avoid trying to preach and trying to, I have a little maxim that I sort of stick to that art should never tell you what something should be, or tell you how the world should be, or tell you or preach. That art should pose questions and leave things open. And the minute that you start trying to come to a conclusion in the creative process, I think you've crossed a line that hurts your work.
It's not like what makes a strong piece of art, and you can interpret it because everybody brings whatever issues they have in their world to interpret it, but the fact is what makes it probably strong is the contradictions. It's fabric pinned up on a wall, this side's not balanced, this side goes down, there's a piece of clay in the middle, there's so many different pieces of contradiction in it, and if you go to every piece in the museum, they all have some sort of contradiction in it.
Yeah.
And what I'm looking at is a complete contradiction. Now, regardless of if I'm come in from my background and being a male and say, oh, it stresses or whatever, but the fact is, what I'm looking at is fabric and there's contradictions. Some of the fabric reaches the ground, it's different colors, it's different textures, there's a hole in the middle of one of them, there's a piece of clay in the floor.
Yeah.
There are lots of levels of ways in which people approach a work like this. Your approach as a sophisticated artist and creator gives you the freedom to look at this and admire certain aspects of it that are in your realm.
Sure. Yeah.
But a lot of people come to the museum saying, what the heck is this? And the museum exists to serve them as well.
Yeah.
Several years ago, Madeira will remember, when Rob Krett was here and they were looking to change the concept of this museum as a place that is accessible to all, that welcomes all. One of the young men in a panel that they had talked very strongly about how he didn't get it. And it was he wanted to understand what is the artist saying to him. He would look at something like this and he did not have the reservoir of experience or artistic exposure or what have you to come up with the kinds of things that you're saying. He wanted to like it and he didn't get it.
That's okay.
There's nothing wrong with giving a hook to somebody who can't go beyond that point.
Right. And I think the subtext to that is, and I feel stupid that I don't understand.
Exactly.
Then I think
So
this
what
is a
does
very...
the museum do him if he just walks around feeling stupid?
Right. I agree with you. I think that good work, and this is something that I'm wrestling with in my own work, that really good work can be accessible, using the term lightly, to many people, almost anyone, perhaps. And I absolutely don't see anything wrong with giving a hook. I just think that there's more to her decision of titling this piece, and I think she's playing some tricks. I don't know. That's what I'm sort of thinking.
But there's also more than one explanation or one response to works of art. Everybody brings their own, so many people's eyes look at this, how many responses. So just because somebody's not getting what the artist was maybe getting and maybe not getting, that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right.
Instead, why can't they, be encouraged to come up with their own interpretation and get them to have a dialogue about it, rather than saying that you're wrong because you're stupid because you don't get the artist. That's not that, that's let them know that their ideas are.
That's what I think something should say on the wall. Should embrace the viewer and allow that empowerment by asking the kind of question that gives him or her the courage to say, well, this is how I feel.